Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. I want to take a look at a couple of articles about the economy, and this is kind of an ongoing concern. Chances are that the markets are going to drop again this week. I believe the Dow futures is up about $10, or sorry, 10 points or something like that right now, as we speak. I checked it about 20 minutes ago, and people, including Gregor Menarino, are calling for another volatile week. And so it's an interesting thing going on because we know in the last days we have good a good idea that in the last days a complete total worldwide economic collapse is going to happen because it speaks of the end days being famine and pestilence, and it also does not speak of the United States as a world superpower or any Western nation as a superpower. It doesn't even seem to um, refer to China as any particular world superpower. So in the last days, it seems like all Western nations, nations as we know it, will be taken down a large number of notches on the world stage. And what we end up with in the last days battles, Ezekiel 38, 39, Isaiah 17, the Revelation verses, what you end up with is some of the nations that are dictatorships, that are ruled by military, that are ruled by a strong arm. And I think that's coming down the pipe. Now, I've had my keynote up before, and I want to just take a look at it again. Um, in Revelation 13, it says, in 16 at the bottom there, it says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that has the mark." Now, it doesn't say no man in Russia, or no man in Egypt, or no man in Lebanon. It says no man. So that means all across the world, no man can buy or sell save he that has the mark. Now, why would the whole world give up their own fiat currencies, their own sovereign currencies? Why would the U.S. give up the U.S. dollar? Why would Canada give up the Canadian dollar? Why would all the countries around the world give up? Why would China give up the yuan when China really wants the yuan to be the next world reserve currency? Why would Russia give up, the ruble? Why would they give up the ruble? There's no reason for it. There's no reason for all these national sovereign governments to give up their sovereign currency in favor of some globalized currency, unless an economic collapse happens and these countries are absolutely desperate, and a world leader and a world government comes together and says, look, we will provide food, we will provide everything that you need so you're not starving and hungry, as long as you give up your sovereign currencies and to accept this new world fiat currency system, this new world reserve currency. And it's, we don't know exactly what it's going to be named or known as, but the Bible describes it as a mark of the beast system, some sign in your right hand or your forehead, and without it, no man can participate in the global economy. So it's interesting when you read between the lines, you read what it says here in the Bible, and all the Bible's prophecies always come true. Being they're coming to fruition and being proven day in, day out. And so we have good confidence that these will also come to pass, and I absolutely believe they will. We're absolutely heading towards RFID, sort of chips that you can implant. They're not moving towards, they're already implanting people, in Sweden and other nations, implanting people with what they think is the next, credit card, the next currency system, and that is technology in your right hand, basically. And the Bible says when this mark of the beast comes into power, they're going to put it in your right hand or your forehead. Well, let's take a look at the timeline here. Go up to the slide that I've shown a number of times. Now, this is complete speculation on my part, but I believe that 2021 is the start of the 7-year tribulation. The end of man on earth is 6,000 years, and that happens in about the year 2028, plus or minus a couple years maybe, but I think that's more accurate even now, because Israel happens to be 70 years old. They are in the land right now, and the Bible speaks of man being able to live 70 years, but if by reason of strength, 80. So Israel is celebrating its 70th anniversary of being in the land, and I think that's significant. I think there's a timeline there, and that's empirical uh, evidence, if you will, to suggest that indeed we are on a timeline that suggests we have 10 years left on this planet, and I believe the last 7 years is saved, reserved for Israel. 7-year tribulation is for the salvation of the Jewish nation. It's going to be a hard time for Jews in Israel, and it's meant to bring them back, to turn them back to recognize God. But before that, they're going to recognize the Antichrist as God first, and then when the abomination of desolation occurs in the third temple, they're going to recognize and say, "Oh, this isn't God," and they're going to turn to the true God and call for repentance. And I think that's what's coming up. I think we have less than 10 years to go right now. But where we are right now is 2 years prior to the year 2021, prior to the start of the 7-year tribulation, what I believe that is anyways. And what I think is, let me see if I can move this down here. I'm moving the wrong window here. There we go. It says we are here, and I believe that is just prior to the economic collapse. You can see the second arrow pointing down from the top is the economic collapse. And I think the dominoes start falling quickly. Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38. And so I think economic collapse is kind of the big indicator. That's the big thing that really gets the end times rolling, if you will. It enables all the other dominoes to start falling into place, falling down. So along that line, we're going to take a look at a couple articles. So let's go ahead and turn off Keynote there. This is the economiccollapseblog.com. I'm not going to read all of it. I'll put the links in the description. But global stocks plunge again, and a former Reagan administration official is warning of a 40% crash. Now, this is David Stockman. And he is saying that a 40% crash is coming. Look at this. Now, I believe this is the buildup. I believe these are the birth pains. I believe this is the birth pains that are happening prior to the big event. I don't think the big event is going to happen this year. I think we're going to see some large fluctuations, some panic even on Wall Street, but the big event is not yet. David Stockman says, or he warns of a 40% stock market plunge, and he says it's closing in on Wall Street. Stockman served as President Reagan's Office of Management of Budget Director, and he's long warned of a deep downturn. Many people have been calling for it since 2008. 2008 was simply kicking the can down the road by printing a whole pile of dollars, and the reason they're increasing interest rates right now is to attempt to put some of the bullets that they fired in 2008 back in the barrel of the gun so that they can fire them again when the next crisis occurs. Will they get the interest rates up enough? And even if they do get them up enough, will they do the same? Will they work the same as they did in 2008? And most would say that they will not. It's going to take a lot more bullets this time to prop up the economy and to kick the can down the road another time, and I don't think that's going to occur. It says, because our financial system is more leveraged today than in 2008, a plunge of that magnitude would be absolutely disastrous, it says. Virtually everyone would need a bailout. At that point, the economic activity would decline dramatically as the flow of credit dried up almost completely, and that's what the central banks are trying to get a hold of, the credit that is so free and easy right now. And so the central banks know that's a problem because debt is hugely increased. So they want to kind of stop that, or not stop it, but slow it down, because that's bad for the economy. The debt is so massive. It's hardly even worth talking about now. It's just so massive. It's got to come crashing down. This article goes on, but David Stockman believes a 40% correction is coming. I believe the economic collapse is going to be so bad that the U.S. dollar will cease from being the world reserve currency. Here's one from Nassim Taleb, and he explains how the global economy is more fragile today than in 2007. All right, sorry, I'm back. I had to do something. All right, and I'll put the link in the description for this one as well. In what was incredibly appropriate timing, given the Shocktober market blow up, that was a significant October, Bloomberg News invited Black Swan author Nassim Taleb to its set on Halloween for a discussion about the increasingly fragile market ecosystem in which we all reside and the mounting risks that Taleb believes could soon ignite another financial crisis that will be even more severe than we saw in 2008. So we don't have these kind of edge people, edge investors coming out and stating gloom and doom. Basically, all people across, all investors, all people in the financial know across the board are warning of trouble. They say it's not sustainable. They don't know when the economic collapse is going to happen, but they're saying it's completely unsustainable. Taleb dressed up as a black swan man, and he wasted little time explaining how the global economy is increasingly vulnerable to a global debt crisis, how global quantitative easing did nothing to fix it. In fact, that made the problem even worse, and it did not fix the underlying problem of too much debt. Instead, it exacerbated it, and how the inevitable reckoning might play out on markets once the long-dreaded inflection point finally arrives. Now the question is, when does this arrive? And no one is really willing to say when it's going to arrive, but it's not. It's going to go down one day soon. Governments think they can borrow for free, and that's called money printing. That's what they do. And so far, they have been able to do it only because all the other nations in the world don't want to remove the U.S. dollar from the world reserve currency immediately, because that would be trouble for their economies as well. We have to borrow $1 trillion, and we're paying some $300 billion in interest. That's in the U.S. That's how much they're paying just in interest. It's not even paying down the debt. $300 billion. This has left the U.S. and the rest of the world on the cusp of a dangerous downward spiral. You can enter a spiral. In my mind, it's when governments have to borrow more and more to pay interest, like a Madoff scheme. The minute you enter that phase, and there's nothing healthy about it from an economic standpoint, and I believe that's exactly where they are. They're they're in the downward spiral right now, and they're never going to be able to pay it off. And so the next option is really to crash the economy and start from scratch, and that's what many, I believe, are planning at this point in time. We've accumulated an additional $10 trillion in debt since the crisis. Plus, we have hidden liabilities that should count as debt, like Social Security. These are unfunded liabilities. They've hidden liabilities when you have to bail out firms. You have hidden liabilities from student debt. You have a lot of things. If you're committed to some expenditures, on top of debt, you have hidden liabilities that should act like debt, and they're just hiding them from the books to make the economy look better. And this is the trouble that's coming down on the earth, and I believe this is all related to end-time Bible prophecy. I believe the Bible foretells a time when effectively the economy has crashed and the world is so poor at that point, and people are starving, probably Mad Max all over the place, that countries, all countries of the world, all people of the world, are calling then for a global government to fix the situation, and a one world leader. And the mandate of that one world leader is to save them. And that one world leader says, look, I'll come in, I'll feed you all, I'll correct the economy, we'll implement a mark of the beast, a new technological fiat currency system, and if you don't have it, you can't participate in the world markets. Not only that, I will bring in peace to Israel and the Palestinians, and we will have peace. I will implement a peace plan that has already been on the table, and I will just go ahead and enforce it. And I believe that's what the one world leader is going to come in saying. But in order to prompt this one world leader to come into power, what I believe at this point in time is that all evidence points to the economic collapse and a worldwide economic collapse. I think that's going to happen soon. Once it happens, though, all the dominoes, all the prophetic verses are going to, I think, start happening in very, very quick succession. As you have panic start, countries start getting nervous, they start running out of food, their populations start starving and rising up, and that's when you're going to see war. Economic collapse brings war, and if that doesn't happen, war brings economic collapse, and that's often that's historically what has been the case. So I think the economic collapse is next. So I'll leave it there, guys. Just a little commentary on what I think is occurring, and the fact that what we're seeing, what we saw in October, Shocktober, is really the run-up, the increase as we see the fluctuations, the birth pains increasing in intensity and frequency. And I kind of think we're angled for next year. I think it too. Everybody says next year, and it's always, when next year comes around, it's always, well, next year, next year. I don't believe we have too much time left before the 7 tribulations, which means this stuff has to start happening soon. And many are warning that the housing crisis, the housing bubble, is kind of probably the trigger event to occur in Western economies, which will start triggering a recession, and then that will trigger other trouble. I think one of these articles had a list of potential. Let me see if I can find it here. Ah, yes, potential trigger points. Let me pull up this. This is from the Economic Collapse blog. Potential catalysts of an economic collapse, and they're in order here. Number 1 is a junk bond bubble bursting. Number 2 is equity bubble bursting. So all these stock market things, stock market causing. Italy, which is bankrupt. Tariffs, Chinese tariffs. And remember, that's what triggered 1929. That's what caused 1929. There were tariffs put in place, and investors got skittish and worried about the tariffs that were happening. And so they started pulling out of the market. The whole Brexit situation, that's still an unresolved situation. Pensions, so unfunded liabilities, all the massive pensions that were promised and that can never be paid out. The housing bubble, and of course China. China wants to rule the world. They want to become the next world superpower. They want the world reserve currency, and so China could trigger the economic collapse. It says many will blame the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is surely to blame, but it is prior bubble blowing policy, not rate hikes, that are the problem. So they are trying to cause the economy to keep going upwards because that looks good and that keeps confidence high. But you can't keep going upwards forever. You need to have a correction, and when this correction does occur, it's going to trigger the massive collapse, far greater than 2008. 2008 was a can-kicking moment. It should have collapsed at that point in time, but they kicked the can. They printed money in thin air, and that stuff is not going to work anymore. The quantitative easing is not going to work again. So I will leave it there for today, guys. I'll look into the economy, the history of the situation, where we're headed, I think, prophetically. And this stuff is coming down the pipe. And Shocktober was an interesting primer, a warning, if you will, to those who may be in the stock markets now. Get out now. Make sure you have hard assets. But beyond that, make sure you know the Lord Jesus Christ, because I don't think there's a very long time after the market collapses before Bible prophecy starts being fulfilled. Ezekiel 38, 39, Isaiah 17, Revelation 13 events, the 7-year tribulation. I think in very short order these things will start occurring, and mainly because I don't think we have a lot of time left before the second coming of the Lord. I think we're less than 10 years now into the last days, and we're in the last minutes, even the last seconds on God's clock. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll leave it there, and we'll talk to you guys in the next video.